Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first Mayor's Megawatt Challenge webinar of 2022, getting the most out of your building automation system. As always, the content for our webinars is driven by our members. And after meeting with all of our members earlier this year, BAS was chosen as one of the priority areas of interest for this coming year. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Catherine Wilson. I'm the manager of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, a program that's been working with municipalities since 2003 to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions in their own facilities. Before diving in, we'd like to thank our webinar sponsors, SetPoint Building Automation and Yorkland Controls, for not only being sponsors of this webinar, but for providing their insights into what municipalities should be considering when evaluating new and existing building automation systems and fault detection and diagnostics. Next slide shows today's agenda. So after the welcome and introductions, we'll dive right into what you should be considering when procuring a new BAS. We'll then get into how to evaluate the performance of existing BAS with the focus on preventative maintenance. We'll then get into trends and why they are such a critical component of any BAS. Discussion will include how you can ensure trends are set up and archived, and how trend data can be used to gain insights into building performance. We'll then discuss how this can be taken to the next level using fault detection and diagnostics. We'll wrap things up with a question and answer period with the audience. So a couple of logistics, please use the chat for technology related questions or questions unrelated to content. For content related questions, please use the Q&A option. This is so the questions can be logged for the Q&A document to be sent out after the webinar. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. Straightforward questions may be answered in the Q&A as we go, but most will be answered during the audience Q&A session at the end. So any questions we can't get to will be answered and circulated in that Q&A document that I mentioned after the webinar. So the next slide, please. This webinar will be conversation style with an excellent group of panelists representing both municipalities and vendors. As with all of our webinars, we strive to bring in the municipal perspective, as folks always want to hear about the experience, challenges, and lessons learned from their municipal counterparts. So I will now ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So Adam, why don't we start with you?
Good afternoon. My name is Adam McMullen. I'm the manager of energy for the city of Barrie, and part of our optimization efforts involves building automation systems. So I'm going to speak a bit to that today.
Awesome. I'm sure folks will be really interested to hear what you have to say on that front, Adam. Thank you. Dave, why don't you go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Cano, Energy Solutions Manager at the Town of Oakville. And as Adam, a key component for our energy management program at the Town of Oakville is our BAS and how we better use it to support our facilities and operations.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Adrian, why don't you go next?
Hi, my name is Adrian Chiquetto. I've been in the building automation industry since 2007. I've had a few different roles during that time, but currently I'm the account manager over at SetPoint Building Automation out of Concord. Just looking forward to participating in this discussion today with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. Paul, why don't you go next?
All right. Hello, everyone. And thanks for having me today. My name is Paul Bergquist. I'm the Business Development Manager for Sky Foundry. We are the maker of an analytics software platform called SkySpark. And today I'm here supporting our Canadian distributor, Yorkland Controls, who is a sponsor for today's event. Looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And Frank, why don't you?
Sure. So yeah, so thanks, Catherine. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Camilleri. I'm the VP here at Enerlife Consulting. We provide technical direction to the programs, specifically Mayor's Megawatt Challenge. And today, my role here is to facilitate the conversation through slides and interaction with the panelists.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everyone. Really looking forward to this discussion. Why don't we dive right in? And why is BAS so important?
Great, thanks, Catherine. Appreciate it. So probably most people on this webinar know how important BAS, but it's becoming more and more increasingly important for energy efficiency, and municipalities are leading the charge with respect to energy efficiency and getting to zero carbon. So can't stress that enough, that a BAS is just essential to have. And hence why the webinar and the topic we're discussing today. One of the things that I'd like to highlight that has been evolving probably over the last 5 or so years is that BAS is appropriate for all building sizes and complexities. No building is too small for a BAS. Once a municipality has some BAS in their infrastructure, in their portfolio with some of their bigger buildings, no building is too small. There's the BAS manufacturers, many of them are producing modular type of components, and they also have a lot of smaller controllers to handle smaller facilities with fewer points. And they tend to have, all they need really is internet access or cellular access to access Wi-Fi. So an example might be, and we're seeing even for small places where they have maybe a unit ventilator or a shed or something, we're seeing that more and more common with just a controller that will monitor key points and deal with optimizing that space. Again, fairly small place with maybe just 6-7 points, and it's becoming more and more economically attractive. They're probably, again, more closer to 10 years ago, the general rule of thumb was 10,000 square feet was kind of used as sort of the border, where anything below that, maybe a BAS wasn't cost effective. It was just too expensive, but that has evolved. That's changed a lot. So I just wanted to stress that, especially as we start to future proof, municipalities start thinking about going forward and future proofing. Things like standalone controllers become problematic when you're trying to integrate over a wider network of facilities, right? So I just wanted to highlight that point because we think that that's extremely important. Okay. So key criteria when considering a new BAS or replacing an existing one. So goal today, we'll talk about some really key topics over here. Openness is a natural one that is important. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Secure data communication in this age of IT attacks and fraud, and it's going to be important to discuss that. And trends in data storage can't be stressed enough. That's what's needed, especially these days, to really optimize your facilities and get to low carbon. Things like alarming, doing so remotely, and its importance, and how to do it in a way that's manageable. Support of legacy products and service in general to these products and more is important. Understanding some of the service frameworks that exist out there. Training, again, we're seeing more and more building owners, building operators that are taking charge, are more proactively involved, so training in their facilities. So I want to discuss a little bit about the training options that are available currently. Documentation is fundamental to maintaining a BAS and going forward to the importance of it, and we'll explain a little bit more about why it's important. And this whole field of sustainability, we thought we'd highlight sustainable manufacturing, as most municipalities have to deal with waste and recycling. So we thought that would be a good component to discuss. Okay, so moving on. So this, the openness, the open protocol, many of you are probably aware of BACnet. Has been around for a bit, but I wanted to highlight the fact that what was its goal in its original intention, and its intention was really to facilitate interoperable communication between vendors at the equipment level. So being able to communicate, the BAS being able to communicate with the boilers, chillers, and rooftop units, things of that nature with the BAS. Prior to establishing BACnet protocol, there were a lot of proprietary type of communication protocols that was making it very difficult and very challenging for owners, period, to have to deal with all these different proprietary systems. So we've evolved. BACnet's been around for a while. But the good thing about it is that it's not owned by any one company. It is managed by ASHRAE. and the interoperability of BAS companies and their products are verified by, again, a third party. So this is non-biased. It's through BACnet testing laboratories, and you can see that even on the website for BACnet testing BTL, you'll find ratings for each of the BAS vendors that you may be considering in the future, and how they rank with certain factors in terms of open protocol. Okay, next. So a little bit of background to try to understand some of the more detail with BACnet. So there is this understanding of trying to understand native BACnet. So basically, a BAS's native BACnet basically comes out of the box ready to communicate with all other products that use BACnet protocol. So there's things like VFDs and boilers and chillers that may have BACnet cards, and BAS that is native BACnet can communicate directly with it without the need of any other devices. If a BAS or equipment is not native BACnet, there's a need for a translator or gateway. And the reason I bring this up is that just need to be mindful, not that anything's wrong with having a translator or a gateway, but just one should be aware of that, the fact that this introduces more equipment into the equation and makes it a little bit more challenging to troubleshoot. And so that's why we want to talk a little bit, that want to highlight that. What I want to highlight too is what BACnet is not. There is this perception out there that although communication between equipment follows a common protocol, things like programming and to a certain extent graphics within ABAS is still very much proprietary. So we need to understand, and what we mean by that is that if you have a Siemens system, say a Delta or a reliable control system, is that they can communicate with each other in terms of reading, but the inherent programming that's done within the actual panels, the controllers themselves, that is very much proprietary still. Right, and nothing is wrong with that, but just wanted to make sure that we understand that even though there's a common protocol to communicate, there's certain things that are still and remain proprietary. So that brings me to some questions. Adrian, just wanted to ask you, what are the challenges, having all the experience in the BAS field and being an account manager, what are the challenges you see in the field when dealing with equipment that's not native BACnet?
Thanks, Frank. I'd say, with native BACnet, it definitely provides a much easier way to interoperate with that piece of equipment. Like you said earlier, it's just out of the box, a little bit easier to work with. Most of the time, it's because those kinds of controllers will have, a fully fleshed out like descriptor list in them for all their BACnet objects. Plus, there's also usually very good supporting documentation from those manufacturers as well. When the device is a gateway, and like you said, right, I want to stress the point as well as you, there's nothing wrong with a gateway. Most of the time, those gateways will be BTL listed themselves, which is a good thing. Where the problems start to happen, I would say, is more so with how that gateway has been set up or programmed, in the sense that the object names a lot of times are the issues. So, we run into scenarios where you look inside of, or you discover a controller and the object names are just, AI5, something like that, as opposed to supply air temperature, which would be something that we can understand a lot easier through an English descriptor, basically.
Okay. No, thanks. That's very helpful. Again, I want to stress here that nothing is wrong with having a translator and gateway, but just managing your expectations and being in the know that there will be a requirement to have a translator in a gateway, and then there can be some difficulty with troubleshooting if it's not done properly, if it's not done in a certain manner. So I guess this is more for everyone's information.
Yep.
So Adrian, just to continue the conversation, given BACnet's been around for a while, and what do you see in terms of equipment manufacturers adopting BACnet? I mean, what's been happening lately in the marketplace with the big BAS providers out there with respect to BACnet? Native BACnet? Are you seeing a trend in that direction, or?
So I definitely see. I mean, all the major vendors on the BAS side absolutely have a BACnet solution that's out there. On the equipment manufacturer side, we're seeing a lot of equipment being supplied with either their own controller that they've developed, or a controller that maybe they've rebranded. And usually those kinds of scenarios have pretty good descriptors, pretty good functionality, kind of what we touched on before. So yeah, I mean, that's typically what we're seeing at this point.
Okay, so it's good to see that the trend is starting to happen, and we know BACNet's been around, but again, sometimes there's slow adoptability, right? And glad to see that we're seeing that. In terms of equipment types, that there seem to be sort of leading the charge on this piece. What equipment types, if you will, are sort of leading the charge, and which ones are the laggards? Just for people to understand, and again, manage their expectations when they're out there.
Yeah, I'd say definitely the larger pieces of equipment, the more facility like level piece of equipment. So something like a chiller or like rooftop unit, even VFDs actually have come a really long way. Any of the major leaders in drive technology, they all have pretty good backend integration built into the drives out of the box, which is nice to have. Laggers, I mean, I'd say sometimes, things like, sometimes certain boiler manufacturers, other smaller pieces of equipment too, I would say, where, it's almost like they're offering a BACnet gateway kind of to meet a spec requirement as opposed to actually like engineering a proper solution. So sometimes that can get in the way, but I mean, it's tough to pick, one or the other, right?
Okay, no, that's good. That's helpful. I mean, again, eventually we're going to see this trend. I'm sure that all equipment type providers, especially the mainstream ones like chillers and VFD providers, rooftop units, they're in the game and they'll try to design a solution as popular.
And I definitely, sorry, Frank. I definitely think though, like now seems to be a good time where everybody is really driving towards good solutions at this point. So there's definitely an improvement there, I would say.
Okay, good to hear. Good to hear. Okay, thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it. Just moving along to, just switching over to this slide here. Sorry, guys. Okay, yes. Talking about again, just the open protocol and just BACnet in general continued, dealing with multiple vendors. So just like to preface this by saying it's very. Having worked with many different municipalities and other vertical markets, multiple BAS vendors is not uncommon. In fact, a lot of them, a lot of municipalities in particular for procurement reasons want to have more than one vendor to depend on, so anyways, that's sort of the preface behind this. So I want to talk a little bit about BAS, multiple vendors in the context of those within the same facility and those within different facilities. So just some points to highlight within the same facility, as I mentioned earlier, that if both BAS manufacturers in that same facility are BACnet, they can definitely communicate with each other, but just be mindful that, programming and again, to the graphics as well is fairly unique to each BAS manufacturer. Not that should stop you from changing vendors if you're having difficulties, if your evaluation of a BAS provider, leads you down one other path than what you have currently in your system. But I just wanted you to want to make sure we highlight that point so you're aware of it, and you just have to deal with that. That's all. Within different facilities, then, and which is very common. Again, we notice this a lot with clients that have to manage a portfolio of buildings. Just some of the things that need to be considered, I guess, especially for some of the municipalities who are starting to venture in getting their buildings automated. You need to think about internal staff training, because now there's more than one vendor. You need to become a little bit more familiar with these different types of facilities as well. What I'd like to do is also talk about the fact that because there's multiple you have to have multiple BAS service companies, right? So that's something to be very mindful of, and multiple sets of hardware and central servers sometimes are things you may have to keep in mind. So this brings me a good question here. This is where I think getting the municipality's perspective would be interesting. So Adam, we particularly, as we know each other well, we understand that you have three main sort of BAS manufacturers in your facilities. What do you look for in a new BAS? Yes, from a procurement perspective, and also just from an operational perspective.
Great question. It's very challenging to scope out projects when it comes to like new construction or replacing a BAS in a large building. So what we're particularly interested in is ensuring that all of the points on a piece of equipment will be available and readable and writable. So what I mean is that if you have a rooftop unit, for example, you want to be able to control the outdoor air damper directly, say through the building automation, as opposed to the internal controller of that piece of equipment. And that's very challenging because the piece of equipment may have an internal controller that doesn't necessarily allow you to do that. So it's more so not just your building automation vendor and specifications, it's what equipment are you going to have, and can you specify that equipment enable connectivity to the building automation. So we're doing this with one small facility that we're doing where we're putting a terminal strip on a package unit, which essentially means that we can directly input the building automation to that terminal strip and directly control essentially that package unit. So that's one of the key issues, is actually the integration and understanding what equipment you have, and knowing that the building automation that you are specifying can connect to that appropriately.
Okay, that's a very good point. We rooftop units in particular is a great example. So I'm glad that you highlighted that, because we deal with a lot of building operators, building owners, if you will, that have to deal with rooftop units, and they're one piece of equipment amongst others that, like you mentioned, have their own individual controllers, and some of them again don't allow you to control the individual components, to your point. And thanks for highlighting that, because in this day and age, and especially if you're trying to future-proof for low carbon, you really need to get into the details. So at least to have that flexibility of getting into the details and optimizing that programming. Having control of the end devices is becoming more and more essential and critical. So when you so thanks for stressing that. That's really important, especially these days, and you're trying to future-proof yourselves. Dave, just on from your perspective, how many? My understanding is that you have one main BAS provider in your facilities. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So before 2011, we did have a few different vendors. Okay. However, when we started bidding for all our new construction projects, we realized that we were giving the contracts to the same company over and over again. Yeah. And we realized there were some benefits of just moving to one vendor in particular. Since then, we've installed our BAS in 17 of our facilities, and they're all controlled under the same vendor.
Okay, good. That's good, and we understand that again, there is no right or wrong answer here. It's really, there's benefits, pros and cons with either one, and we know that Adam has multiple vendors, right? So which is good. We want to hear from both perspectives and the motivations why you went that way. So which is good. With respect to the BAS protocols yourselves, I mean, is there any comments that you'd like to add to what perhaps what Adam said about what do you look for in that vendor, and what you expect from your single vendor there, if you will?
Sure. So we definitely expect to use BACnet as our main communications protocol. For out of those 17 facilities, we do know that we have 3 that are still using an older communication protocol, and we know, and we've been told by this vendor that they're not going to be supporting that anymore moving in the future. So we know that if we want to continue moving forward with this particular vendor, and in general, just to make sure that we can maintain all the programming and the application as we require, then we will need to update protocols to the BACnet. So this year we'll be undertaking a project to convert those 3 facilities to BACnet.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yes, and you're right. I guess BACnet kind of started happening about 20 plus years ago. But you're right. It's and the BAS companies have been trying to adopt it. But that's a real life issue you guys are dealing with, right? The fact that you still have some facilities that under the old proprietary type of communication. But glad to hear that you guys are working towards getting onto BACnet in that open protocol. Thanks very much, Dave. Appreciate it.
Sure.
So just talking a little bit about secure data communication. So one of the things that can't stress enough is really the remote communication from the onset. So many municipalities that have some form of BAS, you likely have dealt with this already. And if you haven't dealt with remote communication, it's real important that you definitely do. This is essential for BAS system and being able to keep your systems efficient. And just from an operational perspective, just like to highlight the fact that this will vary. The types of control and security issues will depend on your IT group, but just something that we'd like to stress that you get this resolved or addressed early on in your strategy in terms of getting your buildings automated. Again, just to highlight the fact that we talked about BACnet being very much an open protocol, a standardized communication protocol. I mean, there's challenges that comes with that too, right? Which leads to my third point there. Consideration needs to be given to BAS manufacturers that use encryption when they communicate between panels and so forth. We've cited, there's been many examples actually where hackers have come through a building automation system and actually hacked into the owner's the proprietary and confidential information. So that's really important. Also, there's other methods there, secure methods of a single sign-on that we're seeing starting to show up. Lightweight directory access protocol, and which kind of brings myself to the next question. Is Adrian, from your perspective, I guess being a BAS provider, I'm sure you're running into this a lot. What are the IT departments of the clients demanding in terms of security these days?
I mean, lately it varies pretty drastically from client to client.
Yep.
With the clients that don't really have much of an opinion, I mean, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're implementing best practices, all the way up to certain owners that are very adamant and have very specific IT requirements. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing. But I mean, some basic kind of IT practices can go a very long way in securing that network. Something like putting all of your BAS controllers onto a segregated VLAN. Using a VPN to access your central server with two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Yes. You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier there, Frank, where you were saying encrypting the data. So now communications between controllers, between different sites, and especially if it's going over the internet, should really be encrypted and at the transport layer. And you can do that through the use of things like back into VPNs, which can also kind of simplify your network layout as well as kind of a side benefit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's great. That's great. And are you seeing that encryption level being offered by many, like BAS manufacturers, are kind of going in that direction? Most of them are offering that, and that should be an expectation of the municipality, that they should see that in the vendors that they look for or investigating. Or
I think it should be an important consideration, like you said, especially in the day and age that we are in. Mm-hmm. Some vendors have created their own encrypted BACnet VPN software. Mm-hmm. Other vendors are in addition to that, adopting the new BACnet standard from ASHRAE, which is called BACnet Secure Connect. Okay. So it's a similar concept to just basically encrypting that traffic.
Okay.
And you kind of mentioned LDAP before. So I mean, LDAP is nice because it allows for that the single sign-on experience for the users, but at the same time, all of the credential management is basically managed by the organization's IT group. Mm-hmm. So for whatever requirements they have for that are all handled there as well.
Oh, okay.
So kind of a nice package.
I see. So thanks. Basically, if I can just reiterate some of the key comments there. I mean, the reality is that various organizations have various approaches to this, and that's been my experience as well, working with different organizations. Is that some are very sophisticated and very, very specific about what IT requirements they have, and then some are a little bit more open to it. But I guess can't stress enough the importance that this is to your BAS, and that you address this and have the dialogue with your IT departments early on, right? Okay, thanks, Adrian.
Thanks.
the trends in data storage, which is a bit of an extension of security as well. One is, we'll get into a little bit more details. We'll show some examples of how to use trends. But one of the things that, at this stage where we're talking about BAS procurement or replacement, if you will, one strong recommendation is that we have, whenever you're putting in any new controllers or things of that nature, please make sure that they set up the trends right in the initial installation. We're finding that probably 99% of owners and building operators that we deal with, this is never done. Or it's done haphazardly. It's not done consistently and comprehensively. So, and you'll see that the importance of trends, and can't stress that enough, is that the use of trends is extremely important to really optimize your building. And again, hitting those pretty aggressive low carbon goals that most of the municipalities are trying to achieve. A couple of things to highlight: that most BAS controllers have limited data storage capabilities, usually a couple of weeks. It depends on the frequency that you're recording this data, but understand that there is a limitation, and hence, because of that, you need to consider data storage for longer periods. So usually having backups to make sure that none of this information is lost. And we recommend a minimum of 2 years worth of trend logs, and the reason for that is that you'd like to compare operation over a long period of time to see likely when problems started happening. We actually recommend more than 2 years if possible. So anyways, something to consider, that when you definitely do need to consider data storage. This is often something that's been overlooked based on my experience recently. And so again, when you do consider it, please consider a minimum of 2 years worth of trend logs, and trends really don't take up too much memory. So just something to be mindful of as well. Ensure that you have a method of extracting that data, accessing that data into a meaningful report. We're going to get into more of that later in the discussion of trend analysis, and even touch upon fault detection and diagnostics. Next point, I'd like to talk a little bit about the alarming piece. So alarming is important for sure, but just my experience generally has been is that initially when working on BAS systems, there were so many things that were being put on alarms, and what ends up happening is that people become overwhelmed with alarms and they ignore them. So that's why I'd like to stress the fact that try to keep only key alarms should be communicated to building operators to minimize this data overload. We're often trying to work, when we work with clients, we're trying to awfully say, put the top 5 or top 10. And that's really a top 5, top 10, because otherwise, again, the operators become overwhelmed and they become desensitized afterwards. They won't even pay attention to alarms. So again, alarming is important, but just in order to manage it effectively, we encourage you to only use key alarms, set up for key alarms to communicate to your staff there. The BAS having remote alarming is really, really important. And these days with handheld devices, this is becoming more and more common. We started seeing this back in 2000 and kind of the late 2008, 9, 10, and 12, and it's becoming more commonplace these days, right? So when you look for a BAS, make sure it has the remote alarming capability. Some of the older systems that, if your system is, say, prior to 2010, it may not have that capability. So just keep that in mind. And again, the importance of this is key in this age of communication, quick communication, and communicating all staff and so forth to get things resolved as soon as possible. Some things to consider as well, critical alarms, some freezing, freeze stats and things of that nature, where it could cause actually damage to your infrastructure. Those would be good. You might want to consider hardwiring those to your building security panel. Again, this would only be for critical alarms, maybe 1 or 2 of them where it's a space temperature sensor in a place, or your boiler loop, for instance, is really in bad shape. And so you want those things where people can respond to it, because, and they need to respond to it fairly quickly in some cases, especially when it's extremely cold out there as well. Again, just having to deal with the enormous amount of alarms. If you're not careful, it's important to sort of set priorities and notification classes, so that and to communicate the severity of them. Otherwise, again, you get that operators would tend to become desensitized to them. They begin to ignore them. I've seen it all the time where they continue to ignore them, because, and rightly so. There's just so many of them. How do they respond to it? So there's a need to prioritize them and classify them and try to stick to a few only. Next, I want to talk about legacy support and serviceability. So, interesting comment from Dave with respect to, he's got a handful of products already that have older technology. Again, kind of to my first point there, look for BAS manufacturers that support their legacy products. I mean, you get to a certain point in time where eventually you do have to replace your components, but you don't want to be forced too early. So backwards compatibility is very much a related factor. So look for companies that are able to communicate with their older panels, even if they, given as new as BAS companies come up with new panels and new technology for their panels, it's important that they communicate backwards with the existing hardware, so it minimizes you or reduces the forcing you to actually replace the BAS equipment and controllers well before their end of life. I've dealt with clients where their panels are only 10, 12 years old, and they're stopping servicing and stop servicing those panels. And so you don't want to be in that situation. So make sure you ask those questions early on and actually ask for evidence of that. So that's important. Different service models. So this is where I was getting about with the topic there of serviceability. So there's two main service models that we've noticed that out in the industry. There's BAS manufacturers that have an integrated BAS installation and service group, if you will. So companies like Siemens have this, JCI generally have this, as well as Honeywell, and there are others as well. Just to understand this, again, it's not a criticism, it's just to highlight the differences in the approaches that you need to be mindful of if you're dealing with them, and if you have to escalate issues. With this model over here, you need to escalate that through the branch and upper management. But again, just always be mindful that you're dealing with the same BAS company. I've had to do this several times. It's not a problem. You're looking for a company, hopefully, that has management, that upper management that is responsive. And that's been generally my findings, is that if I've had to go up above the branch, then usually they are responsive. But just be mindful of that. If you are dealing with a BAS manufacturer that has an integrated BAS, you have to go that route. And with respect to BAS manufacturers, another model is our manufacturers with independent installers and service providers. And in this situation over here, if you're unsatisfied, again, I've been involved in these situations too. The manufacturer themselves will recommend an alternative BAS installer service provider. So if the main difference here is that you don't have to deal with the same service provider in this case over here. So again, a little bit of a different option, if you will, but something to be mindful. Companies like Delta Controls, Reliable Controls use this model. So, okay. Something I like to highlight, and I'll talk a little bit more about it again, is regarding documentation, but replacement of a BAS. So some of the municipalities that may be on this call, are considering replacing the BAS, I guess, just like Dave mentioned that he's got 3 buildings that he has to replace that. So just wanted to highlight the importance of documentation and a good initial wiring installation. So if the documentation is good and the wiring is done really, really well, replacing a BAS legacy system with the same BAS provider, you can reduce the cost quite a bit. I'm indicating as much as 50%. So this is a fact, right? We've actually been working with providers that actually have done this, and again, it could be quite significant. So again, can't stress enough, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, the importance of documentation and making sure that the initial wiring installation is right. So for when you are even with an existing BAS, or if you're doing new ones, make sure that there is good documentation. Again, we'll talk more about it afterwards. If you are going to be replacing your BAS legacy system with a different BAS provider, it still can reduce costs, perhaps not as much as the 50%, because there's specific requirements in terms of wiring panels and things of that nature. But you can still significantly reduce your costs, 10 to 20% or so. So again, we just wanted to highlight that. Things to be mindful of when you're replacing your BAS, and the importance of documentation, and making sure, as many of you probably undertake some of your facilities getting a new BAS or a BAS for the first time, make sure that these things are stressed. The initial wiring installation is done well and properly, well specified, and well commissioned and inspected, and as well documentation is set up properly initially and maintained going forward. Next item I'd like to talk about is this one, and this is a big topic here. Training. Again, as I mentioned, what we're seeing is a trend that in order for to hit a lot of the low carbon targets and really optimize energy usage in your facilities, you know, a lot of building operators and owners need to or are getting more and more involved in their building automation system. So so we just wanted to highlight these areas over here and to get the perspective of some of the municipalities that we have here. And, you know, many manufacturers will only provide a building level type of training. And what I mean by that is basically how that building, their BAS installation works specifically for their site. And they will provide a service, you know, some BAS service to make all the changes to programming themselves, right? So, so there's, you know, pretty well all BAS manufacturers do that, but making sure that is available. But what we encourage you is to look for BAS manufacturers that provide various levels of training. And what we mean by that is that again, it just depends on your municipality and the stage you are in terms of evolution of building automation system within your facilities. Some of the more sophisticated municipalities that already have BAS in their buildings, you know, will probably be interested more in having more options in terms of training. And what I mean by that is expert training, for instance. We're training where they can actually program. We know, we are aware of some clients that actually have internal staff that actually know how to program in these systems, just to, you know, to deal and troubleshoot with things, as opposed to rely 100% on a BAS service provider. So if you're considering, you know, depending on your stage in terms of your, you know, automating your facilities, you know, looking for that ability or the options of having various levels of training, including expert training, is good to consider. And if you plan to have internal staff, again, a larger role with the BAS, you know, consider manufacturers that do have that. And that kind of brings me to the question with for some of the municipalities, and then as well as, and we'll talk a little bit, get perspective of set point automation, Adrian there. So we'll start with you, Adam. In terms of a BAS service provider in its technical support, what do you look for in that?
I look for a partnership. We've had experience in the past where reach out related to, say, a recommissioning exercise to implement an action. And I remember an example where we paid $2,000 to essentially recirculate a pool unit overnight, close the damper, and the company came on site, and then I was checking, and it didn't work. And essentially they said, oh, we quoted you for 10 hours of work, not to actually complete the project. So we don't have that system anymore. We have a different system. But so I'm looking for a partnership where you work with your provider and you have an outcome that you're looking for. And in some cases, the provider will do very well because they can probably do the work efficiently. But sometimes they'll run into trouble, and I don't want to get, you know, a bill for an extra controller for $1,200 because it's easier to wire it that way or something like that. So it's a partnership, and it's challenging because if you have legacy systems, some service providers don't have that model, but others do. So I think that's the key thing. So you want to find a service provider that you can build a relationship to understand that there's going to be future work, and if they do good work, there'll be benefits to both.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. I mean, the word that like you used is partnership, and you're right that they're looking out for your interest, not their own. Right? To say I booked 10 hours. To your point, it was a great example that you brought up, and just so you know, I might see that a lot. so it's not uncommon to see that. But you're right. The organizations that are going to be more successful are the ones that really partner with you and understand your needs, and don't come back to you with that kind of a response. They'll deal with your issue, right? So that's a key one. So thanks for highlighting that piece of it. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more, just if we can extend the question a little bit about your you know, given the stage that you're at with your facilities, what kind of level of expertise do you have or want to have internally? Maybe you can describe a little bit what you have currently. What's your future outlook for that in terms of expertise?
Well, I'm kind of wishing I was in Dave's scenario where you have a common provider, because you could conceivably at that level hire someone who has BAS skills. and have them internally, because when you start adding up all the optimization time and the improvements and even the spec reviewing, there's a benefit perhaps if you're of a certain size to have that internal resource that specializes in that, but you have to be of a certain size and scale. So what we're trying to do is ensure that we understand controls in the sense that we have third-party commissioning. We look at the sequences. We ask the questions about integration, so that when we put out proposals and scopes of work, that we're at least asking the right questions, and then we have somebody to verify who's an expert that isn't the company. And that's kind of our perspective right now. It's challenging when you have different providers because you have different levels of service. So that's where we sit at.
Okay, no, that's a great point that you bring up. You mean the key thing here is that you're right. It depends on the size of and how many BAS systems that you have in your facilities, and you're right. It makes it considerably more challenging when you have more than one vendor, right? And again, it's not uncommon to see that many portfolio managers, people that manage a portfolio of buildings, will run into many different types of BAS vendors on their facility, and it again becomes more challenging. So it kind of brings me to a question with Dave. I guess you're in a bit more of a luxurious spot that Adam kind of highlighted, that you have one sort of main manufacturer that you're dealing with. What do you kind of look for from them? And then the corollary to that, I mean, is the level of expertise that you have or want to have internally to be able to service some of that.
Absolutely, Frank. So, and probably echoing Adam's wishes that having a single source provider for the BAS really opens up some other opportunities that you might not have had when you were working with different ones. I mean, we've always depended on we have Johnson Controls as our main provider for BAS, and we've always depended on them to provide preventive and corrective maintenance to our facilities. We have had training provided by them directly to our facility operators in the past, but there's always staff turnaround, and we did not have that expertise to maintain the BAS on site. However, last year or the year before that, I can't recall when that happened, we were fortunate enough to convince our senior management that we needed internal expertise to help us look after the BAS. And we were able to create a position of BAS specialist within the town. So we have one person working with us that has expertise on the Johnson Controls system particularly. And that's helped us not only tackle some of that internal training that can happen for our staff, but also troubleshoot some of the issues that we should have gone to our supplier to begin with. And when we hired this person, we were also fortunate enough to attract someone that was working and had been working with us in projects at the town through Johnson Controls. So they already had that expertise on our facilities and with the Johnson Control system. So that was kind of a big win for us that we were able to keep all that knowledge and expertise on staff.
Okay, that's great. That sounds like a win-win-win on that one there. So I'm happy to hear that you were able to do that. And yes, and I'm sure Adam's there looking at with some envy, and hopefully we'll get to that point. But you're right. I mean, that's where the trend is going, and it's good that you're able to do that. And again, as organizations start to head towards low carbon and stuff like that, working towards that goal. If it's not now, maybe a few years down the line, you can try to find some way of dealing with that. So something to consider for sure. Just to keep things moving here. Adrian, just a quick comment, your perspective. We'll just try to keep this part short. What percentage of your clients, like what are your clients demanding in terms of training these days? The different various levels, if you will. What are you seeing? What are the trends you're seeing, especially now versus maybe 5-10 years ago?
We're definitely seeing an increase in owners wanting to be more involved with the system. Again, it varies definitely from owner to owner, but like in our case specifically, as being an authorized dealer of reliable controls, we have that opportunity to send those individuals to expert level training offered from the vendor itself, which I think is a great thing for everyone.
No, I appreciate that's good. I think that yeah, if anything we can stress here on the call here is that it's nice to have that flexibility, the option of doing that. Whether you end up choosing to do that and having expertise in house, I mean that's something that you'll have to make a judgment call depending on what stage you are in terms of your BAS and automation, automating your facilities. But it's nice to have that option if you so choose to. So something to consider for that. So thanks, Adrian. Just trying to move things along here, and we will touch upon this really quickly, but we mentioned it already, the documentation. Again, just the importance that, especially as you get new systems put in place, make sure that there's good documentation and that you expect shop drawings from the vendor, and that they get reviewed, and always make sure that not only do you get shop drawings initially, but that they're updated once during the construction period to actually reflect what actually did occur, and also any changes that you make after the system. Make a habit of it, put in process in place that anytime there are any changes, you update that documentation. And some of the things to consider in the as-builts are your network device list. You want to know how it's wired, basically how the panels and the controllers are wired. You definitely want a points list, right? You want to know where all the points are, and not just a point list. You want it by panel and controller, so you want to know where exactly that point is. And again, increasingly, as Adam touched upon it, and I'm sure Dave considers it important too, and I know we have lots of experience in this area. We optimize a lot of the sequences. This is really important to document the sequences of operation so that everyone knows. And every time you make a change to it, you need to really update that documentation. And can't stress it enough that we put in bold over here that if you have an existing BAS that the documentation is missing, really strongly consider getting the original contractor to provide that documentation, as I mentioned to you, because of the problems and issues you can run into with that. If you don't have it, right, the cost implications of troubleshooting and things of that nature. Adrian, just really quickly, if maybe you can just comment really briefly on the importance of documentation from your perspective, having been in the field and what your company does.
Yeah, no, just to echo what you said, Frank, I think it's important. Like you said, network diagrams, sequence of operations for sure. You have to have that in place, because without it, you really don't have anything to compare to.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important for sure.
Okay, good. No, thanks. And yes, and make sure that you update that as well. I mean, what we find is that they start off nicely, you get a sequence of operation, but we find that changes do get made, and trust me, they get made all the time. Just in my experience over the years, they always get changed because you're fine tuning things. But make sure when you finally get to that point that you're updating those sequences so you can have future reference and that they're accurate, right? So thanks, Adrian. Just moving along here, we know in light of sustainability in general, we know that municipalities, especially having to deal with many different aspects of sustainability, not just energy efficiency, waste, and recycling. So something you might want to consider: BAS manufacturers that have long hardware warranties. Generally, with that comes more prudence, if you will, in quality, and because of that, there'll likely be less recycling. Right, if they have these long warranties, they're not going to want to replace equipment on their warranty. So request repair return rates, again, just some numbers there to put things in perspective. Anything less than a 1% return rate is a good sort of metric to follow, but look for long periods of time, because a company could be good for 1 year or 2 years, but look for consistency, right? So again, just to highlight the fact that repairing something is better than replacing it where reasonable, right? Just to minimize waste. And again, there are different protocols. So we won't get into a lot of them, different protocols in terms of how a BAS manufacturer recycles. But just wanted to highlight that really briefly with all of you. So just kind of moving along to the next segment, if you will. BAS service level agreement, things to consider. And we highlighted the importance of your BAS, but your BAS needs to be maintained to ensure accuracy. Initially it works well first couple of years, but you really need to maintain it just like you do with other pieces of equipment in your facilities, no different than a vehicle. So some things to just keep in mind, consider longer terms with with your service providers. A minimum, we're seeing that a minimum of 3 years is kind of is what the trend is to show good performance and have good outcomes, with an option to extend to 5 years if possible. Once you evaluate your performance, 3 years gives you good opportunity to do that. We're seeing too some clients, including a clause in the contract to cancel within 30 days notice, just unless in case you ever deal or in a situation, and hopefully not in a situation where there's major non-performance issues. I've seen this activated, only a handful of times, but and you really do need it, do use it, but it's good to know that you have that, right? So something to be mindful. Adam, maybe just your thoughts really quickly. What are the typical durations of your BAS SLAs, and why? Maybe just your brief comments on that, if you can.
That's a great question. In some cases, we canceled them historically, and then those building automation systems would run into the ground a little bit. I think the key about these is that there's so many hours dedicated to maintenance, but actually verifying the efforts that are undertaken by the company is key. So what points do they check? Are they verifying? Are they calibrating? Because often it's 2 days a year, someone shows up, they leave after a couple hours, they send a report. But if you have an agreement, you want to make sure that you're there with them and you have someone who's verifying their work and checking all the things that you need. And then any issues that have arisen over the year, you say, okay, look at this point, look at that point. So if you have an agreement, it's a great opportunity to leverage that time that you're already paying for and ensuring that you're getting those issues kind of dealt with all the time.
Okay. No, that's really important, and we'll get into more of the details of exactly what you mentioned there. And it's really important talking about when you do get a service level agreement, what is it that you include in that, right? What's the scope of work? And we'll talk about that in a moment. Dave, just your perspective on this. Any thoughts on durations of service level agreements that you have with your service provider, and why?
I'd say we do, as you mentioned, considering those longer terms, specify a minimum of 3 to 5 years and continue extending as we keep working with the same provider. And we always try to maintain that conversation and collaboration with them. We know that this is a partnership with them, and we have as much to gain with this as they have. So we always try to bring forward our concerns, our issues, and having a person on board that knows more and understands more how the BAS is supposed to be working, it can help us really ensure that the company is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I think it's just going to help us more to keep that collaboration going with them.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's really important. You stressed again the point that Adam brought up too, and again, I agree with that totally. Is this partnership piece of it, and it's good to see that. Again, it's a little bit easier when you have one vendor to have these longer term SLAs, which is great. But glad to see that you're seeing that, and you see the value in that, which is really, really good. So thanks for that, which kind of leads into a bit of this. It's a natural fit to this section over here. What do you include in your service level agreement? And again, this is becoming more and more important and focus on here. We've observed, through my experience over the last 30 years, really is that most of these service contracts have been just time based, where they come in, as Adam mentioned, well, you just got a block of hours, and what they do in there is not really well defined, right? So basically, what we're highlighting the fact is that there's a strong need to consider two aspects of it: to have a sort of an outcome based scope of work, which is preventative maintenance, basically, things like annual sensor calibration, things like relative humidity sensors and temperatures, and then verifying end devices, things like dampers are stroking properly and valves are opening and closing and so forth, and then kind of running the equipment through its paces just to see if there's anything that pops out that's not there, right? So that's what we're seeing. There's more of an emphasis and a need for that piece. But in addition to that, what we've noticed is that we kind of started off working with clients more on an outcome space, but what ended up happening is without the block hours, with some time to deal with service related issues that are not really related to just annual calibration, there was some issues that happened on site. So we recommend both an outcomes-based service work and also block hours of some sort that's relevant for your facility, given the issues that you have and raise on it. So I guess you've touched upon it, Adam and Dave, a little bit here, but maybe Adam, just real quickly, you kind of mentioned that you're looking for more scope of work that is more outcomes-based. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, I guess there's, like you said, there's block options or there's prescriptive items. And
Yes.
I think it depends on the relationship with your provider. I like block hours because I don't necessarily care if a vendor does a certain calibration on a certain sensor if it's not crucial. But if
Mhm.
I could get that 4 hours for them to help troubleshoot and optimize a unit that would
Yep.
normally cost me $2,000,
Yep.
why I prefer that. But it depends on the vendor. Some vendors don't care for that. They say, no, this is what we're here for, and this is what
Okay.
we're going to do. So it depends on the vendor. But I really like the idea of having flexibility with your vendor so that you could use those hours to your best impact.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. That's interesting. Interesting perspective that you want that flexibility. If you choose to go outcomes based and prescriptive, you can do that. You just right now you're finding the block hours kind of works for you. Dave, on your end, Dave. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. Dave, on your end, what do you have in your current service level agreements or your PM that you do? Are you doing PM work, or is it more just blocks of hours of time that you're getting into?
We're doing the same as Adam's doing with his facilities. We do block hours. All the facilities that we have, we get a specific number of hours per year, and we determine how we want to use them moving forward. We have a bit of flexibility with the service provider in that if we have any issues that fall outside of these, we can tackle them.
Yep.
And we have that understanding that they'll come into the facilities, work with our facility operators, and make sure that we're running as efficiently as possible.
Okay, good. I mean, just how are you dealing with like calibration and things like that? Do you do that within your block hours? Is that basically it?
Yes, that's correct. So whatever calibration needs to happen would happen within those block hours.
Okay, good. Okay, good to hear that piece of it. So that's great. We've noticed generally that block hours, that there's been this tendency to go to block hours, but not a defined scope at all, and where people just come in and they have nothing to do, but other than just okay, what does the operator need? So it's glad to see that even though you have block hours, which is what the BAS service providers do, as they estimate the hours, is that kind of stuff is actually knowing that there is some scope of work other than just troubleshooting, right? That they do, which is good. Yeah, so great to hear that piece of it. Just moving along real quickly, just to stay on time and on track here. No, these are just screen captures of the different areas that we think are important to focus on. I won't get into any of the details of it, but this is, this is the prescriptive work, mechanical systems, if you will. So this is just a screen capture of what we've actually introduced and see in service level agreements. Again, not to go through all of it, but it's the annual frequency of checking dampers. So you can see here, over here, you see an annual frequency when it comes to like checking dampers, checking fans, and things of that nature. Same thing with these are major pieces of equipment. So we'll just kind of move along here a little bit, but I think you generally get the point over here. This is the BAS panel level. So those were the equipment pieces of it, so I'm hoping that again, we won't get into the detail of it, but things like backing up panels and things are important here. The next item is the interface. So this is usually your front end. Again, just things to be mindful of are, again, certain frequency of certain types of inspections that are needed. And we see this more with more sophisticated, clients that have had it for a long time and do have, budget dollars too, right? I mean, this takes a bit more money for sure, but we find in the end, in the long run, it pays for itself in the long run, anyways. So again, these are just experts. We're there to just show you of samples of what typically is included in a service level agreement, where it's very prescriptive, right, and things of that nature. So just to sort of end off and talk and bring closure to the service level agreement section here. Managing expectations here. So what we've worked with clients, almost as much as 10 years ago, that went from a just strictly block hours with no real well-defined scope of work to one where there's a combination of prescriptive and hours. This is what we've seen. We've seen a huge benefit. Occupant complaints decreased significantly. We had a client that would have 200 complaints, big client, 200 complaints a month. It went down to 50 after 2 or 3 years of implementing this type of work. Repairs, just another thing too, repairs and replacement of sensors and end devices will increase initially if you've, especially older buildings that you've had to, just to deal with the deferred maintenance. So, but then again, it does decrease significantly, right? So the demand service calls decrease over time as well, and buildings will operate a little bit more efficiently, more consistently when you have something that's more prescriptive, or there's a defined scope of work. I know Dave and Adam, even though they say their contracts are not necessarily, perhaps as prescriptive as what I mentioned over there, but it sounds like they're in those hours there's an expectation of a certain scope of work, and so we encourage you to consider that, especially in the long run, to make sure that your systems are running optimal. Adrian, just in the interest of time here, maybe you can just describe really briefly what trend you're noticing, being in this arena of the service level agreements. What are you seeing in terms of the scope of work? Is it becoming more and more prescriptive in nature, where the scope is thin, or is it just strictly hours? What's your general sense?
We're definitely seeing a mix of both. Again, it's very client dependent. So, like Adam and Dave were saying, they prefer that block model, block hour model, where we have some other clients that prefer that as well. But again, we are doing some very defined scope of work type service level agreements as well.
Okay. That's good. That's good. And I think I just want to highlight the fact that is that nothing's really wrong with buying block hours, because that's how BAS companies will estimate it. And in fact, we encourage that if you do go for very prescriptive, that you encourage the hours expectations to do that work. But I think they can't stress enough that you put some boundaries on the scope of work that's related to the hours. That's all. And it sounds like that's what I guess yourselves, Adam and Dave, are doing in your facilities. Even though you have block hours, there's an expectation of an outcome of it. It's not just coming in and just troubleshooting randomly, right? So that's good to hear. Thanks, Adrian. Just kind of moving along to another key area, which is where I'd like to spend a bit of time on, just being mindful of the time that we have. It's 2:05 right now, but I think I can get through this pretty quickly. But I do want to stress the importance of trends and analysis of this information. We touched upon it in the earlier slides. The importance of trends is extremely critical, especially these days when you're trying to optimize your systems, as we heard from both Adam and Dave, that they're trying to do in their facilities, and what most municipalities either are doing or need to do to achieve those low carbon goals. So, just a little bit about trends for those that are not familiar with the different types that exist. Basically, there's a mix of them. There are interval-based type of trends that such as analog points such as temperature and humidity. You have them polled every 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. 15 minutes seems to be the standard, but it's important that when they get set up with that interval in place. Tend to not want anything less than or more than 15 minutes. We find that if you have more than that, if they're just hourly readings, you don't get into the granularity that you need, and sometimes you need even 5-minute intervals. But that's what we mean by the analog. And then digital points, enable things coming on and off, or scheduling, and then we'll show you an example shortly of a combination of these different items over here. But these typically are set up for change of value. But the next item there, where we talk about some points having both types of trends enabled, is important, and that will become more and more important. This part over here about having them. Being able to trend it in both manners is becoming more and more important as you become more sophisticated, or the need for sophistication to do the deep energy recommissioning that's required. And again, we'll show you an example of that. What is important, and we'll get a taste of it too, is a reporting tool that can help you mine this data as well. And so having good graphical tools, if you will. Many BS companies have some sort of graphical packages that provide this type of offering. So just be mindful of that and look into that, investigate that. basically, it's good we talked about trends and the importance of archiving them. So having it over a long period of time so that you can actually see see if they're operating as per the sequences of operation. That's really where it comes down to, is saying, well, with this equipment is supposed to operate in this manner, is it actually doing that? And I could tell you from personal firsthand experience, 99% of the time, BAS provider will go in and program it. But if they don't have a verification process, and many don't, just so you're aware, it's just the reality of it. Not that all of them don't, but many don't, that they don't use trend logs, but demand that they do. That when you do get sequences of operation and they indicate that they've implemented it, show me proof. And that's where trends come in. Show me proof through trends that it's actually working as intended. And that's and I heard Adam say that, and Dave harp on that as well. So this is a excuse me here. This is an important thing to keep in mind as well. Sorry. So the again, just the types of trends that should be basically all key equipment points should be trended, air handling units, fans, boilers, chillers, and pumps. These days it's real important, but the big equipment for sure, air handling units, boilers, and chillers in terms of priority, but it's not that difficult once you demand it of your service provider, or the manufacturer, when you're getting this thing installed, to get them all set up, because they come in very handy after the fact. Just kind of moving along here to the next slide here. So again, we talked about the 2 years of history, being able to access the trends. We talked about that, and inside and outside of the BAS. So being able to access this remotely is important. So that's good. And visualizing trend data, which I'll get into now. So to just give you some perspective on the type, some of it is inherent within the BAS companies themselves, but some of it is, we'll touch upon it a little bit. It's fault detection and diagnostics. So let me just see here. So, okay, lots of information here, but we'll try to keep this simple. We felt that it would be good to have just a real life example here with respect to, so you can relate to it. And this is actually a real life situation over here. So I'd like to highlight here that the goal of this exercise here is, this specifically is to look at examining temperatures and set points. If you're looking at the heating loop temperature, we want to make sure that it resets during unoccupied periods. I mean, the whole point of this is that during unoccupied periods, we want the building to use less energy, right? So there's no need to heat it or heat it as much, if you will. We reduce the unoccupied temperature setback. So we're looking for the fact, is it actually doing that? And if the return water temperature to the boilers, if you will, ends up actually, if it's in an operable region, we want to make sure that it doesn't damage the boiler. So we be mindful, and can't stress this enough, that energy efficiency doesn't have to compromise. In fact, it should never ever compromise the integrity of the equipment. So ensuring that the return water temperature is above 140. So just quickly here on the first point over here, this is the unoccupied periods. The purple line over here is the set point of the building loop. So this is the water temperature going into the building. So the set point does go to 90 degrees, which is great. That's the purple piece. But the actual temperature of the loop, this green line over here, you can see that it doesn't. And so anyways, so even though the set point is there, it's not actually happening. So again, this is how you can use trends to understand if your building is working as intended. Again, programming is such that the set point does reset, but actually it's not actually happening. And the same thing on the return water temperature side of the item number 2 over here. We have this line over here, which is the boiler return water temperature to boiler number 2 in this specific facility. You could see here's the 150 sort of degree range, and here is in and around the 140 range, and then you're able to, with the CSV files, the files that you get from the trends, to see, is it actually going below 140, right? So anyways, that's how trends can be useful, at least when it comes to temperatures and set points. Wanted to give you a bit of a taste for that, but also want to give you a taste for other types of analysis. So in this case over here, again, same building here, but different part of the sequence that we're testing. So we want to make sure, in this case over here, we're investigating trends to make sure that only one boiler operates at a time and that burner fluctuations are reasonable. So here you can see here the red line here. This is the burner operation of boiler number 2. And you can see over here, this is boiler number 1. So first point is that only one boiler is operating. Boiler 1 is off here, and boiler 2 is running. So good, that part works, and the fluctuation isn't unreasonable. This is good. The other thing too is that we're looking for if the heating mixing valve goes to a minimum position during unoccupied periods, and so that is this piece over here. So the fact that this valve position with this green line over here, so this is unoccupied periods, and then the valve is actually going to, in this case here, 30%. Okay, and over here you can see here that when boiler number 2 is off now, which is the case over here, boiler number 1 starts to kick in, and it's the only one operating, and fluctuations, burner fluctuations are reasonable. They're not crazy. They're not cycling throughout this whole graph. So again, just showing further evidence of how you use trends and the importance that they're actually working, that your equipment is actually working as intended, right? So the next item real quickly, this is the last of them, so a bit of a brain cramp for you, but this is important. This is examining status, as we talked about, things that are enabled and disabled. So over here, we're just, again, operating one boiler at a time. So these 2 items over here represent the burner of boiler 1, and this is the status, or the enabled, if you will, on boiler 1. So they kind of go together, they work together, and this is the same for boiler 2. And this is the schedule. So we've got 5 points over here. And so you can see here that, during, these are actual days, this is actually March. And so, hold on, and sorry, complications of being at home. So you can see, again, only one boiler is operating at one time. Boiler 2 is operating here right till Thursday, and then Friday kicks in, or the end of Friday kicks in, is around noon, boiler 1 kicks in. So again, this is just telling you, yes, only one boiler operates at one time, and then, wondering, making sure that the occupancy schedule is actually switching between occupied and unoccupied. So this is occupied, this is unoccupied, again, occupied, unoccupied, and you can see it's consistently happening. And on the weekend, it's a little bit longer, the unoccupied periods, which makes sense. Again, this is just another example of how you verify that. Just in the interest of time here, this is one view that we just wanted to highlight. Is that this is a lot of information here, but it's basically those 3 trends that we showed you in the 3 different slides. This is a consolidated view, and the importance of this is, when you get a little bit more sophisticated, is to help you with the troubleshooting, right? The main thing is if you remember in the first slide, what we were having a problem with the valve. The temperatures being, the set points being set back, this purple line, but the actual temperature in the loop wasn't going back. And so by having all of this information all on one, which is kind of this is becoming more and more commonplace in fault detection and diagnostic tools, as well as some BAS manufacturers may have this, but we're trying to understand why that's actually happening. And the answer really is this, and this is a real life example, is that this mixing valve has a minimum position. It's set for 30% here, and this is one boiler operating. So basically, having to see all this valve position set at 30% is allowing too much water to go into the building loop. So 30% of the water goes into the primary loop, and that minimum of water that has to stay high, hot temperatures, that goes into the building loop, and that minimum is just set way too high in order for this to reset. So after being able to view all of these in a consolidated view, we're able to investigate why this is happening, and the answer to this one here, and we're working on it currently, is reducing this to 10 or 15% as opposed to the 30%, and it's already brought this line closer to over here as well, right? So so that's the consolidated view piece of it, and wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of this and the training that goes associated with it. As you can tell, there's lots of trends and a lot of information over there. But I wanted to highlight the fact that BAS providers can provide training on how to do this. So, site-specific training that I talked about in the past, in the previous slides, and their interpretation. Most BAS providers, do have that capability, but look for that in your providers, that they have, training capabilities and really understand your site, really getting to know your site and to interpret those results. And they can also help you depending on how far down the path you want to go in terms of having internal staff on how to interpret that and how to resolve issues. Setting up trends is knowing how to set up trends is important, and understanding how to deal that with different. Again, you can do that internally, or you can try to have your BS service provider provide that piece. Again, the consolidated views, just wanted to highlight the fact I already mentioned briefly, is that there's some BAS organizations, most of them actually have some software of some and dashboards of some nature to view multiple trends. Just be mindful of that. But just one of the things that I'll touch upon after this is really that consolidated views is becoming very, very common in the world of fault detection and diagnostic software, which I'll talk about a little bit briefly. But just to pause really quickly here, just Dave, maybe just starting with you, because I always pick on Adam first. Just maybe you can give us some feedback on how you currently use trends in managing your buildings.
I'd say that unfortunately we don't use trends as much as we should be, and I have to go back to some of the statements you mentioned at the beginning, Frank, is that we have too many trends, we have too many alarms, too many points of contact, and we haven't really had someone to look after the BAS as a whole.
Yes.
So I think we first need to clean up our trends and alarms, and then we can start thinking about looking at the more critical operations, and instead of just focusing on, well, something's going on in the building, what happened, let's fix it, and then go back and figure out what went wrong.
Yeah, that's a good response, and that's Dave. That's a very common thing I hear. Just so you know that it's you're at various stages in your evolution with your building automation system. What I'm referring to over here is really during it's a recommissioning type of activity, as well as when you're really sophisticated, when all your buildings are kind of really working well, and you're really getting into it. Some it looks like in you're not alone. Many municipalities and other clients in general are just trying to get their buildings automated. So there's a lot to deal with over here. So, but good to hear that you're going to be looking towards doing that piece of it, and it's totally understandable that you're not there yet, right? Most organizations aren't, right? So, thanks for that, Dave. Adam, your perspective on this? Where's your head at?
Trending is trending is critical. So what we've done in the energy group is we essentially, I think we have 16 building automation systems. Okay. You learn the key trend points to check, if not daily, but typically when you have a switch of weather. And I do it often, and my colleagues do it often, where you go in and you check the 4 or 5 trends in the building, and you're able to quickly diagnose if certain things are happening. And often heat wheels fail or something like that, and so you can go and quickly check the 3 things. And in the past, what would happen is we get a bill and our gas would go up 30% for a month. But now it's like, oh no, the heat wheels failed. So let's get that fixed, or there's some other sequence issue. So it is critical. And once you know which points are the most important from an optimization perspective in the building, check those on a regular basis, and you can really catch things that go sideways, or you can find further opportunities for optimization.
Okay, no, that's good. Again, great to see it. I know that we've communicated in the past and that you do focus on trend logs, and that is when you're at that stage where you're really trying to keep your buildings efficient, and you don't want to be surprised by those big energy bills. That is what you need to do. That's the reality of it, right? So it's good to see that that's the stage you're at right now, and we encourage that as municipalities become more involved in trying to get their buildings efficient, that they do that. That's a necessity, really, to get to the levels in terms of it. But we understand that that each municipality is at a different stage in evolution with their building automation system, but something to keep in mind for sure. So thanks for that. Just kind of moving on to touching on this really quickly. We're kind of at the tail end of this, and we want to leave just a couple of minutes for questions here. But taking it to the next level, fault detection. Again, this is probably beyond most municipalities, but we've been fortunate enough to work with some clients that are at this level, and we've seen it work. But just wanted to highlight what fault detection and diagnostics, what it is. Some of you may know of it, but just want to describe it. Basically, a fault is this is the closest thing to artificial intelligence. And this is kind of like when you're really sophisticated and you have the funds, because we understand that municipalities are always constrained with funding budgets. Is that basically it's a fault, it's an anomaly. So instead of having someone look at trends all the time themselves, which is a good thing to do anyways, this here just takes it to the next level and highlights all the problems, things that are just not operating properly. So it'll detect things of that nature. So FDD is really these days, FDD can be used to optimize your building operations, can be, but you need to have someone that really knows how to optimize the building. Just a bit of caution, but what's really important is when you're ready for it. Again, this is more when you're more sophisticated, is that it can and should be used to sustain optimal operation. And just talking about the different types of its capabilities, there's some that offer real-time fault detection. Some use historical. Most of the ones that we've dealt with use trend logs. Again, trend logs are at the very much the foundation of all of this. Again, graphical analysis is common. I just showed you that consolidated view. That is from an FDD provider. In fact, that is from SkySpark, which is from that Yorkland Controls represents. We use that. That is one sample of the type of software that FDD does. But dashboards are very common in these platforms. Some BAS providers have their own version of it, but there are also independent versions as well. So just a question on this, Paul. Just wanted to get your perspective on this. What's been your observation over the last 5 years on the uptake of fault detection and diagnostics?
Sure. So, we've seen a tremendous amount of uptake over the last 5 years in analytics, and I would say FDD is really a subset of what we would call analytics. Yeah. And even with the tremendous amount of uptake, we're probably still looking at just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more buildings out there that need this type of solution. I'd make one comment on having funds available to do this type of work specifically for the municipalities. Just a comment on what you just said. Now, unlike a BAS system, you can start applying analytics and fault detection to just a very small subset of your building. You don't have to do the entire thing, and you can generate tremendous value with a small set. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think in terms of the uptake, I think some parts of the world are much faster at adopting new technologies than others. Mm-hmm. And certainly owners and operators have become more familiar with the value of data and how to improve the performance of their buildings and their energy utilization. Mm-hmm. And I think that the conversation is really beginning to change more from a general education to more specific advanced use cases like GHG tracking, tariff rate analysis, and really workflow tools, probably most importantly, workflow tools that can take you from the initial identification of the problem or the fault all the way through resolution and tracking it all along the way.
Yeah. So no, thanks. That's very helpful, Paul, and thanks for highlighting the fact that you can start off small. Just to pilot it, see how it goes. And you're right, I'm seeing it. This is very pronounced in certain verticals that we're seeing. Again, some leading edge organizations, and then we also understand and that some vertical sectors tend to be a little bit slower to the game. But glad to see that it's actually the awareness is being raised and that you're starting to see an increase. This is all about big data and handling it. This is the future for sure. And again, just don't want to spend too much time on this part of it because a lot of the organizations are, a lot of municipalities are kind of getting their buildings automated. But this is one thing you definitely need to keep in mind, right? So let's just, I wanted to make sure that for those municipalities that are at this stage or considering it, these are the kinds of things that you need to be mindful of. We're kind of really running out of time here, but just to talk about the process really quickly, is that as Paul mentioned, it's big data. Just be mindful of the fact that there's a process that needs to be put into place for this, faults would you're going to have quite a few faults if you don't implement this properly, and you can get easily overwhelmed. So, but it's important, I guess, as I talked about, to having a current sequence of operation because the faults won't work. Again, and similar to alarms, but this takes it to a whole new other level. You need to prioritize them, and usually needs to be managed through another process. Really quickly here, just in the interest of time here, I know we're down to the last 4 or 5 minutes on this piece over here, but maybe we'll kind of end it off here in terms of the fault detection and diagnostics, because it sounds like most organizations, are, at least on the call, likely aren't there yet, but certainly appreciate it. And I can't stress enough the importance of having this. But Catherine, just in the interest of time here, we don't have much time for questions and answers, but can you sort of bring some of those questions up? Or
Sure. So we have a question here related to some content from the beginning. Someone's looking for perspective or experience regarding portfolio-wide BAS systems versus standalone systems, and getting a little bit more into some of the advantages and disadvantages of each.
Okay, that's good. And oops, I'm just trying to minimize that piece here. I mean, yeah, my perspective is that for and again, you know, Adrian and please chime in, and others, but my perspective on this is that if, as you're looking out for the future and building your infrastructure, it's really important that you look at a consolidated view of BAS systems that can integrate with each other, that can look at multiple buildings. You should try to stay away from BAS that are standalone or that are more individual focused, that can't be viewed. As you heard Adam talking about it, you heard Dave talking about it, the fact that they've got this huge portfolio of buildings, you want to have you know, one point of access, if you will, to be able to see all the facilities, right? Because we're going to be dealing with carbon reduction and climate change for the next 30 years. So if you're at that stage where you have a choice in what BAS gets put into your system, definitely strongly consider systems that are very much open and that you can view a portfolio of them, and there are many BAS companies and manufacturers out there offer that ability to look at more than one building. It's becoming more and more commonplace, and I strongly encourage you to do that. Catherine, anything else that you might want to highlight? I know that we've talked a lot.
Yeah, we have a few that are somewhat technical that I think would be best to be answered in the question and answer document that we'll be providing following the webinar. Sure. Yeah, because I think they're going to be a little bit longer answers that we may not have time for, and people will probably be easier to see a text written version of the answers. Sure. So thank you everyone for your questions, and we'll make sure that anything that was any questions that you have will be answered in that document, and it'll be easier to reference for you anyway. Okay, great. Okay, so that's great. A lot of information here, folks. But again, hopefully you found it interesting. It was great to have the panelists here and get their perspective on things, all of them. So thanks to Adam, Dave, Adrian, and Paul for participating in this and giving their expertise and their perspective on things. So appreciate that. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that as well. Thank you so much to our panelists. That was really excellent information. And thank you, Frank, for facilitating the discussion today. I think it was really, really useful for people. As I mentioned, as we didn't have time to address all the questions, we will make sure they're answered in the Q&A, which will be posted on the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge website, along with the recording of the webinar and the slide deck as well. And if anyone has any questions about any of the content, or if you think of questions after, any questions about the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge program in general, please feel free to contact me at the email that you, Frank, you just scroll through to the last. Oh, did I? Okay, sure. Yep. Okay. I think everyone has my email anyway, but there it is, in case you have any questions for me. Please feel free to reach out. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Great. Take care. Have a good rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.